Commander Vextar stood before the great memorial wall in the center of Station Nexus Prime. The wall stretched high above him, covered in millions of names carved into black stone. Each name belonged to a warrior who had died fighting for the Galactic Alliance. The alien commander's forearms moved slowly as he traced the letters of fallen comrades. His thick-scaled fingers stopped at one particular section. Here were the names of his squad from the Void Wars. Captain Drakmore, who had saved an entire colony ship by flying his fighter directly into a Void Wraith mothership. Lieutenant Zilhan, who held the line at Kepler Station for 14 days straight without sleep. Sergeant Nexivo, who carried wounded soldiers to safety even after losing 2 of his 4 arms. Vextar's mandibles clicked together softly. This was his ritual every morning before starting his duties. For 800 years he had served the Galactic Alliance as their premier military strategist. He had fought in more wars than any other being in the galaxy. The Void Wars, the Crystalline Rebellion, the Great Purge of Sector 7, the Machine Uprising, and dozens of smaller conflicts that still kept him awake at night. His chest armor displayed the marks of his service, golden stars for each major campaign, silver bars for every decade of service, and a special red crystal that marked him as one of the few survivors of the Battle of the Twin Suns. Other beings would step aside when they saw him walking through the corridors of the station, some out of respect, others out of fear. Vextar had earned his reputation through blood and sacrifice. He had seen entire species wiped from existence. He had watched planets burn and civilizations crumble. He had made the hard decisions that kept billions of beings alive, even when it meant sacrificing millions of others. The commander turned away from the memorial wall and walked toward the main briefing chamber. His heavy footsteps echoed in the empty corridor. It was early in the station's day cycle, and most beings were still sleeping. He preferred it this way. The quiet gave him time to think, to prepare for whatever crisis would demand his attention. As he entered the briefing chamber, his aide approached with a data pad. The young Altarian female had worked for him for only 2 years, but she had already learned to read his moods. "Commander, the morning reports," she said, keeping her voice low. 3 border skirmishes in Sector 12, but nothing requiring immediate action. The supply convoy to Outpost Gamma arrived safely. And sir, there is one more item. Vexitar took the datapad and scrolled through the reports. Standard problems requiring standard solutions. Pirates attacking trade routes. Territorial disputes between minor species. Equipment failures at remote stations. After 8 centuries, these issues felt routine. "What is the additional item?" he asked without looking up. "A new species is joining the Alliance today. They call themselves humans. Their delegation arrived on the morning transport." Vextar's 4 eyes barely glanced at the information. Another primitive species seeking protection under the Alliance's banner. He had seen this same scenario play out hundreds of times. Some young species would discover faster-than-light travel, venture into space, and immediately realize how dangerous the galaxy could be. Then they would come begging for the Alliance's protection. "Have they been given the standard orientation materials?" he asked. "Yes, sir. They will attend the integration ceremony this afternoon. The Council has requested that you conduct the military assessment." Vextar nodded. The military assessment was a formality he had performed countless times. He would evaluate the new species' potential contributions to the Alliance Defense Forces. Most species offered some useful skill, whether it was advanced technology, unique biology, or strategic resources. Very few actually contributed combat personnel. He looked at the basic information about humans on the datapad. Bipedal mammals from a planet called Earth. Average height about 60% of his own massive frame. No natural armor, claws, or obvious weapons. Their planet was located in a quiet sector with no major strategic importance. They had achieved spaceflight only recently and had limited technology compared to Alliance standards. "Typical," Vextar muttered under his breath. Another soft species that would need constant protection. The commander spent the morning reviewing other matters. A dispute between 2 colony worlds over mining rights. Personnel assignments for the new battlecruiser squadron. Updates on the ongoing patrol routes along the dangerous Outer Rim. Real military business that required his expertise. As the afternoon approached, Vextar made his way to Integration Hall. The massive chamber was designed to accommodate beings of all sizes and environmental needs. Atmospheric processors maintained different air mixtures for different species. Gravity fields could be adjusted for various comfort levels. Temperature zones allowed both ice-dwelling and desert species to attend the same meeting. The human delegation was already seated when he arrived. 3 individuals sat at the designated area for new member species. They wore simple clothing that looked almost ceremonial, dark colors with minimal decoration. No visible weapons or armor, which was normal for diplomatic meetings. Vextar studied them as he took his place at the senior staff table. The first human appeared to be their leader, a male with graying hair and calm eyes. The second was a female wearing what looked like military dress uniform, though it was unlike any military clothing Vextar had seen. The third was an older male carrying a portable data device. Ambassador Hyunwoo, Colonel So-ra, and Dr. Jin-ho according to their files. Standard diplomatic titles from a species that probably had no real military to speak of. The commander had seen this pattern before. Many species used military ranks for ceremony, even when they had never fought a real war. The integration ceremony began with the usual speeches from Alliance Council members. They welcomed the humans to the galactic community and explained the benefits and responsibilities of membership. Trade agreements, technological sharing, mutual defense pacts, cultural exchange programs, all standard procedure. When it came time for the military assessment, Vextar activated his presentation display. Holographic images filled the air above the assembly, showing the various threats the Alliance faced on a regular basis. As new members of the Alliance, you must understand the dangers that exist in our galaxy. He began in his deep, commanding voice. We face enemies that your species has likely never encountered. The first image showed a hive swarm vessel, a massive organic ship that looked like it was grown rather than built. The hive swarms are carnivorous species that consume everything in their path. They attack in overwhelming numbers and show no mercy to any form of life they encounter. The next image displayed a void wraith, a being of pure energy that could phase through solid matter. The void wraiths exist partially outside our reality. They can manipulate space and time, making traditional weapons useless against them. They have destroyed entire star systems. A third image appeared showing sleek chrome ships with impossible geometric designs. The machine collective represents artificial intelligence that has decided organic life is inefficient. They convert planets into factory worlds and use captured beings as raw materials for their construction projects. Vextar continued through his standard presentation, showing images of each major threat the Alliance had faced. He explained casualty figures, successful defense strategies, and the ongoing patrol schedules that kept these enemies at bay. The humans listened politely throughout his presentation. They took notes and asked a few basic questions about territorial boundaries and communication protocols. Nothing unusual or particularly insightful, just the sort of practical concerns any new species would have. When Vextar finished his presentation, he expected the humans to express gratitude for the Alliance's protection and ask about non-combat support roles they might fill. Supply runs, medical assistance, research support. The safe jobs that kept soft species useful without putting them in danger. Instead, the older human with the data device raised his hand. Commander, thank you for that comprehensive overview of galactic threats. Before we discuss our potential contributions to Alliance defense, we believe it would be appropriate to provide some context about our own background and experience. Vextar settled back in his chair, expecting to hear the typical story. A peaceful species that had accidentally discovered space travel, perhaps through some scientific experiment. Maybe they had encountered one minor space pirate attack that convinced them they needed protection. We want to be completely transparent about our history, Dr. Jin-ho continued. We appreciate the Alliance's willingness to extend protection to new member species, but we believe full disclosure about our background is the ethical approach. The alien commander nodded approvingly. At least these humans understood proper protocol. Dr. Jin-ho activated his own data device and looked directly at Vextar. Commander, in your 800 years of military service, what would you say was the longest continuous conflict you have personally experienced? Commander Vextar felt pride swell in his chest as Dr. Jin-ho asked about his longest continuous conflict. This was exactly the kind of question he enjoyed answering. It gave him a chance to share his experience and help these new humans understand the reality of galactic warfare. The siege of Kepler Station, Vextar replied without hesitation. His forearms gestured toward the holographic display. bringing up images of the massive space station. 14 standard years of continuous combat against the Void Wraiths. We held that station against impossible odds. The images showed the battle-scarred station floating in space, surrounded by the twisted wreckage of thousands of ships. Void Wraith attack vessels hung in the darkness like deadly shadows, their energy weapons creating brilliant flashes of light against the station's shields. The Void Wraiths wanted to use Kepler Station as a gateway into our reality. Vextar continued, his voice filled with the authority of someone who had lived through hell. If they had succeeded, they could have brought their entire dimension into our space. Billions of beings would have died. Ambassador Hyunwoo leaned forward slightly, listening with obvious interest. Colonel Sora made notes on her datapad. Dr. Jin-ho nodded thoughtfully, as if he was comparing this information to something in his own experience. For 14 years, we fought them without a single day of rest, Vextar said. Supply ships could only reach us once every few months. We ate ration bars and recycled water. We slept in shifts, always ready for the next attack. Many of my comrades went insane from the constant stress. The commander's voice grew softer as he remembered friends who had broken under the pressure. By the end, we had lost 60% of our original force. The station itself was barely holding together. But we held the line. We stopped them. Other beings in the integration hall listened with the usual mixture of respect and horror. This was the story that had made Vexitar famous throughout the Alliance. The siege of Kepler Station was taught in military academies as the perfect example of defensive warfare. Dr. Jin-ho waited until Vextar finished his account before responding. Thank you for sharing that, Commander. 14 years of continuous combat is indeed impressive. Your sacrifice and that of your comrades saved countless lives. Vextar accepted the praise with a slight nod. He had heard similar words many times over the centuries, but they never lost their meaning. We appreciate you taking the time to educate us about galactic threats, Dr. Jin-ho continued. It helps us understand the context of Alliance military operations. However, we should probably discuss our own background before we talk about how humans might contribute to Alliance defense. The alien commander settled back in his chair, ready to hear about whatever minor conflicts had convinced these humans they needed protection, probably some encounter with space pirates or a territorial dispute with a neighboring system. You asked about our longest conflict, Dr. Jin-ho said, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. We call it the 100 Years' War. It lasted 116 of your standard years. Vextar's four eyes blinked in surprise. 116 years was an extraordinarily long time for any conflict. Most wars lasted only a few years before one side achieved victory or both sides exhausted their resources. That must have involved your entire species, Vextar said, assuming the humans had fought some galactic empire that had threatened their homeworld for over a century. Actually, no, Dr. Jin-ho replied. The 100 Years' War was fought between two human nations on our planet, England and France. It was just one of many conflicts happening at the same time. The commander felt confused. Two nations from the same planet fighting for over a century? That seemed like an incredible waste of resources and lives. But that was not our longest conflict, Colonel Sora added, speaking for the first time. We have records of wars that lasted much longer. The Reconquista lasted nearly 800 years. The Crusades continued for approximately 200 years, with multiple campaigns across different continents. Vextar's mandibles clicked nervously. These numbers did not make sense. How could a single species sustain conflicts lasting centuries without destroying themselves completely? Perhaps we should provide a broader overview, Ambassador Hyunwoo suggested. She activated her own data device, and new holographic displays appeared above the assembly. The first image showed a blue and green planet covered with swirling white clouds. Earth looked peaceful and beautiful from space, with no obvious signs of the warfare the humans were describing. Our planet has a surface area of approximately 510 million square kilometers, Hyunwoo explained. For most of our recorded history, this surface has been divided among competing nations, kingdoms, empires, and city-states. The display changed to show a map of Earth's continents, covered with shifting colored boundaries that represented different political entities throughout history. At any given time in our history, multiple wars were being fought simultaneously across different regions of our world, she continued. These conflicts ranged from small border disputes to massive continental wars involving dozens of nations. Dr. Jin-ho took over the presentation, his scholarly tone making the information sound like a routine lecture. We have documented evidence of over 14,000 distinct armed conflicts in our recorded history. This number includes only major wars and does not count smaller battles, raids, or civil conflicts. Vextar stared at the display, trying to process this information. 14,000 conflicts seemed impossible for a single species to survive. Your species fought 14,000 wars against external enemies? He asked, hoping he had misunderstood something. No, Commander, Colonel Sora said quietly. We fought 14,000 wars against each other. Every conflict in our history has been humans fighting other humans. The integration hall fell completely silent. Other Alliance members who had been listening to the presentation with casual interest now stared at the human delegation with shock and disbelief. Vextar's forearms gripped the edges of his chair. In 800 years of galactic military service, he had never encountered a species that had fought exclusively against itself. Most species develop space travel specifically to escape conflicts on their homeworld, or to find resources that would end internal disputes. Your people never had external enemies? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. None, Ambassador Hyunwoo confirmed. Until we achieved spaceflight and began exploring other star systems, every enemy we ever faced was human. Every weapon we developed was designed to kill other humans. Every military strategy we created was tested against human opponents. Dr. Jin Ho brought up new images showing various time periods in human history. Ancient armies clashing with bronze weapons, medieval knights charging across battlefields, sailing ships firing cannons at each other, and strange flying machines dropping explosives from the sky. We developed increasingly sophisticated methods of warfare over thousands of years, he explained. Each innovation was immediately copied and improved by our enemies, forcing us to develop even more effective weapons and tactics. The display showed weapons that looked primitive compared to Alliance technology, but Vextar recognized the underlying principles: projectile weapons, explosive devices, chemical agents, and energy weapons. Humans had independently developed many of the same technologies used by galactic civilizations. We should clarify something important, Colonel Sora said, looking directly at Vextar. When we say we fought against each other, we do not mean occasional skirmishes or minor disputes. We mean total warfare involving entire populations. She activated another display showing massive gatherings of human soldiers, hundreds of thousands of beings organized into precise formations, carrying weapons and wearing protective armor. Our largest single conflict involved over 100 nations and resulted in more than 70 million casualties, she continued. This war lasted 6 years and was fought simultaneously on every continent of our planet. Vextar felt his breathing become shallow. 70 million casualties in a single conflict was more than the total population of many Alliance member species. The idea that humans had inflicted such losses on themselves was almost incomprehensible. And this was not unusual for your species? He managed to ask. Unfortunately, no, Dr. Jinho replied. Large-scale warfare has been a constant feature of human civilization. We have never experienced a period longer than a few decades without major conflicts occurring somewhere on our planet. Ambassador Hyunwoo looked around the silent integration hall, noting the shocked expressions on the faces of other Alliance members. We understand this information might be disturbing, she said diplomatically. We want to be completely honest about our background because we believe transparency is essential for successful Alliance membership. Vextar tried to reconcile what he was hearing with his understanding of how civilizations developed. Species that fought constantly against themselves usually destroyed their own planets or depleted their resources so completely that they never achieved space travel. How did your species survive long enough to reach the stars? He asked. Dr. Jinho smiled slightly, the first time any of the humans had shown any emotion during their presentation. That, Commander, is a very good question. Vextar leaned forward in his chair, his forearms trembling slightly as he waited for Dr. Jinho to continue. The human's smile had disappeared, replaced by the serious expression of someone about to share uncomfortable truths. To understand how we survived, Commander, you need to understand the scale and nature of our conflicts, Dr. Jinho said. He activated his data device again, and new images filled the holographic display above the integration hall. The first image showed what appeared to be a massive gathering of human soldiers. Thousands upon thousands of beings stretched across a landscape, their weapons glinting in sunlight. But something about the image seemed wrong to Vextar. The humans looked too small, their weapons too primitive. "This is the Battle of Gettysburg from our Civil War," Dr. Jinho explained. Over 160,000 human soldiers participated in 3 days of fighting. 8,000 died, 38,000 were wounded or missing. Colonel Sora stood and pointed to different sections of the image. What makes this battle significant is not just the numbers, but the fact that every single participant was from the same nation. We were fighting ourselves over political and economic differences. Vextar's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Your own people fought a civil war with over 100,000 participants?" "Commander, our civil war lasted 4 years and involved over 3 million soldiers," Ambassador Hyunwoo said quietly. "It split our largest nation completely in half. Families fought against families. Brothers killed brothers on the battlefield." The display changed to show maps of battle movements, casualty reports, and images of devastated cities. Vextar studied the information with growing disbelief. In his 8 centuries of military service, he had never seen such detailed documentation of warfare within a single species. The American Civil War resulted in approximately 750,000 deaths, Dr. Jinho continued. But this was just one of many civil wars in human history. We have fought ourselves with remarkable consistency. New images appeared showing different time periods and different regions of Earth. Humans in various types of armor and clothing, carrying weapons that evolved from simple metal blades to complex mechanical devices. The Chinese Civil War involved over 4 million soldiers and lasted 22 years, Colonel Sora said, her voice maintaining the same calm educational tone. The Russian Civil War lasted 6 years and resulted in millions of civilian deaths from fighting, disease, and starvation. Vextar felt his breathing become labored. The numbers were staggering, but what disturbed him more was how casually the humans discussed these conflicts. They spoke about millions of deaths the way he might discuss routine patrol reports. "These civil wars," he managed to say, "they were fought with primitive weapons, correct?" "Before your species developed advanced technology." Dr. Jinho shook his head. "Actually, no. Our civil wars became more destructive as our technology advanced. We developed new weapons specifically for fighting other humans, then used those weapons against ourselves with increasing efficiency." The holographic display shifted to show images that made Vextar's 4 eyes widen in horror. Massive explosions that created mushroom-shaped clouds rising into the atmosphere, cities reduced to smoking rubble, landscapes scarred and poisoned beyond recognition. "We developed chemical weapons during our First World War," Colonel Sora explained. "Poisonous gases that would kill soldiers in their trenches. We used these weapons extensively against other humans." She gestured to an image showing soldiers wearing strange masks over their faces. Both sides developed increasingly deadly chemical agents. Chlorine gas, mustard gas, phosgene. We turned our own atmosphere into a weapon against ourselves. Ambassador Hyunwoo activated another section of the display. "We also developed biological weapons, diseases specifically engineered to kill human beings. We researched ways to contaminate food supplies, water sources, and even the air itself." Vextar gripped his chair harder, his claws leaving deep scratches in the metal armrests. In galactic warfare, biological and chemical weapons were considered tools of absolute last resort. Most civilized species had banned their use entirely after witnessing their devastating effects. "Your people used biological weapons against your own species?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Extensively," Dr. Jinho confirmed. "We also developed weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. We called them nuclear weapons." The display showed more mushroom clouds, but these were larger, more terrifying than the previous images. Entire urban areas simply vanished, replaced by circles of destruction that stretched for kilometers. "The first nuclear weapons were used against 2 of our cities," Colonel Sora said. "Over 200,000 civilians died instantly. Many more died slowly from radiation poisoning over the following months and years." Vextar stood abruptly, his massive frame towering over the human delegation. Other Alliance members in the integration hall were staring at the humans with expressions of shock and revulsion. "You used weapons of mass destruction against your own cities?" Vextar demanded, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Yes," Ambassador Hyunwoo replied simply. "And then we built more of them, much more powerful ones. Dr. Jinho brought up new images showing sleek metal objects that looked deceptively small and harmless. At the peak of our nuclear weapons production, we possessed over 70,000 nuclear warheads. Each one was many times more powerful than the weapons used against our own cities. The alien commander felt the room spinning around him. 70,000 weapons capable of destroying cities. The total military arsenal of the entire Galactic Alliance did not include that many weapons of mass destruction. We calculated that our nuclear arsenal could destroy every major population center on our planet 17 times over. Colonel Sora continued. We called this doctrine mutually assured destruction. The idea was that no one would start a nuclear war because everyone would die. Vextar collapsed back into his chair, his forearms hanging limply at his sides. Your species developed the ability to destroy your own world, then continued building weapons anyway? For over 40 years, Dr. Jinho confirmed. We lived under the constant threat of total extinction. Every day human beings went to work, raised families, and built civilizations while knowing that a single political decision could end our species forever. The holographic display showed images of massive military installations, submarines lurking beneath ocean surfaces, and missile silos hidden in remote locations, all of it designed by humans to kill other humans on an unimaginable scale. But we adapted, Ambassador Hyunwoo said, speaking for the first time in several minutes. When direct warfare became too dangerous, we found other ways to compete. New images appeared showing humans in different environments. Some wore strange white suits and helmets, standing on the surface of a gray, airless world. Others worked in laboratories filled with complex equipment. Still others gathered in massive arenas, cheering for athletes competing in various physical contests. We competed in space exploration, she explained. 2 of our major nations raced to land humans on our planet's moon. We turned our competitive instincts toward scientific advancement, technological development, and cultural achievement. Colonel Sora nodded. We discovered that the same drives that made us effective warriors also made us effective explorers, inventors, and creators. We channeled our aggressive tendencies into pursuits that built rather than destroyed. Vextar stared at the images of humans walking on their moon, conducting scientific experiments and celebrating technological achievements. These were the same beings who had built weapons to destroy their own world, yet they had somehow turned that destructive energy into something constructive. You learned to control your violent nature? He asked, grasping for some explanation that would make sense of what he was hearing. Dr. Jinho considered the question carefully before answering. Not control, Commander. We learned to understand it. We studied our own capacity for violence until we understood exactly what we were capable of doing to ourselves and others. He gestured toward the images of nuclear weapons still floating in the holographic display. These weapons taught us the ultimate lesson about warfare. We learned that there are some fights that nobody can win. Ambassador Hyunwoo stood and faced Vextar directly. Commander, you asked how our species survived long enough to reach the stars. The answer is that we survived by learning what survival actually costs. The alien commander looked around the integration hall, noting the stunned expressions on the faces of other Alliance members. Representatives from dozens of species sat in shocked silence, trying to process what they had just learned about humanity. Every galactic species we have encountered learned about warfare by fighting external enemies. Hyunwoo continued. You fought to defend your homeworlds, to protect your people, to secure resources or territory. Noble causes with clear objectives. She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. We learned about warfare by fighting ourselves. We know exactly what intelligent beings are capable of doing when they have no external enemies to unite against. We understand the psychology of total war because we lived it for thousands of years. Vextar felt something cold settle in his chest as he began to understand. Dr. Jinho continued his presentation while Vextar sat in stunned silence. The alien commander's forearms trembled as more holographic images filled the space above the integration hall. Each new display revealed another layer of humanity's violent history. We should discuss the nature of our warfare in more detail, Dr. Jinho said, his scholarly tone remaining calm despite the horrific subject matter. Our conflicts were not limited to organized armies fighting on battlefields. We developed concepts of total war that involved entire populations. The display showed images of burning cities, civilians fleeing their homes and massive columns of refugees stretching across devastated landscapes. Vextar had seen similar scenes during galactic wars. But something about these images felt different, more personal and desperate. During our Second World War, we deliberately targeted civilian populations, Colonel Sora explained. We called it strategic bombing. The theory was that destroying enemy cities would break their will to fight. New images appeared showing flying machines dropping explosive devices on residential areas. Entire city blocks disappeared in massive explosions, replaced by craters and rubble. Vextar could see tiny human figures running through the destruction, trying to escape the falling bombs. We bombed each other's cities for years, she continued. London, Berlin, Tokyo, Dresden. Millions of non-combatants died in their homes, their schools, their places of work. We turned civilian areas into legitimate military targets. Ambassador Hyunwoo gestured toward a particularly disturbing image, showing the aftermath of an aerial bombardment. This attack on Dresden killed over 25,000 civilians in a single night. The fires burned for days, creating temperatures hot enough to melt metal. Vextar's mandibles clicked uncontrollably. During the Void Wars, both sides had maintained strict codes about protecting non-combatants. The idea of deliberately targeting civilian populations was considered a war crime throughout the galaxy. Your military forces attacked your own species' children? He asked, his voice cracking with disbelief. Regularly, Dr. Jinho confirmed. We also used civilian populations as weapons against each other. During sieges, we would surround enemy cities and prevent food or supplies from entering. The goal was to starve the population until they surrendered. The holographic display shifted to show images of humans in various states of malnutrition. Skeletal figures wandered through empty streets searching for anything edible. Bodies lay in piles, too numerous for proper burial. The siege of Leningrad lasted 872 days, Colonel Sora said. Over 1 million civilians died from starvation, disease, and exposure. People ate leather, wallpaper paste, and sawdust to survive. Some resorted to cannibalism. Several Alliance representatives in the integration hall made sounds of revulsion. A few got up and left the chamber entirely. Vextar remained frozen in his chair, unable to process what he was hearing. We developed siege warfare into an art form, Dr. Jinho continued. We would surround enemy cities for years, sometimes decades, slowly starving the population. The psychological pressure was often more effective than direct military assault. New images showed different time periods and different regions of Earth. Medieval cities surrounded by armies, supply lines cut, walls slowly crumbling under constant attack. The faces of the defenders showed the same desperate hunger and fear across different eras of human history. The siege of Jerusalem lasted 3 years, Ambassador Hyunwoo said. Contemporary historians reported that mothers killed and ate their own children to survive. The city's population was reduced by over 90%. Vextar gripped the arms of his chair so hard that the metal began to bend under his claws. Your people, your own species, ate their young during warfare. Survival instincts overcome social taboos when pushed to extremes, Dr. Jinho replied with the detached tone of an academic discussing theoretical concepts. We documented many instances of cannibalism during prolonged sieges and famines caused by warfare. The display changed again, showing images that made Vextar's stomach turn. Humans attacking other humans with weapons that seemed designed to inflict maximum suffering. Bladed instruments, burning devices, and machines that appeared to torture rather than kill quickly. We also developed psychological warfare, Colonel Sora explained. We learned that breaking an enemy's mind was often more effective than destroying their body. We created weapons and techniques specifically designed to cause terror and despair. She pointed to images showing humans in cages, humans being tortured with various devices, and humans performing forced labor under armed guard. We built camps where we imprisoned members of our own species, sometimes for political reasons, sometimes for racial or religious differences. Vextar stood abruptly, his massive frame swaying as he tried to maintain his balance. You built prison camps for your own people? Extensively, Ambassador Hyunwoo confirmed. During the Second World War alone, we systematically imprisoned and murdered over 6 million humans, based solely on their religious and ethnic background. We called it the Holocaust. The holographic display showed images that Vextar's mind refused to accept. Massive compounds filled with skeletal human figures, industrial facilities designed for mass killing, and piles of bodies stacked like refuse. The scale was beyond anything he had ever encountered in galactic warfare. "We built factories for killing humans," Dr. Jinho said, his voice finally showing a trace of emotion. "We applied industrial efficiency to genocide. We developed techniques for murdering thousands of people per day, then disposing of their bodies efficiently." Colonel Sora activated another section of the display. "We also conducted medical experiments on prisoners. We tested the effects of freezing, burning, poisoning, and disease on living human subjects. We justified this as scientific research." The images showed humans strapped to tables connected to various machines and devices. Their faces showed agony and terror as other humans in white coats performed procedures that were clearly causing deliberate harm. Vextar fell back into his chair, his forearms hanging limply at his sides. In 800 years of military service, fighting against the most dangerous species in the galaxy, he had never encountered anything as systematic and deliberately cruel as what humans had done to themselves. The experiments were conducted by doctors and scientists, Ambassador Hyunwoo explained. Educated members of our society who took oaths to preserve life, yet participated in torture and murder for the advancement of knowledge. Dr. Jinho brought up new images showing different historical periods. This was not an isolated incident. Throughout our history, we have used fellow humans as test subjects for weapons, diseases, and psychological manipulation techniques. The display showed humans being exposed to radiation, chemical agents, and biological weapons by other humans. Some of the subjects appeared to be unaware that they were being used in experiments. "We tested nuclear radiation effects on our own soldiers," Colonel Sora said. "We released biological agents in populated areas to study disease transmission. We conducted psychological experiments on prisoners, children, and mental patients." Vextar's breathing became rapid and shallow. "Your own scientists experimented on human children?" "For decades," Dr. Jinho confirmed. "We justified it as necessary research for military and medical advancement. We told ourselves that the knowledge gained would benefit our species, even though it was acquired through torture and murder." The alien commander looked around the integration hall, noting that nearly half of the Alliance representatives had left during the presentation. Those who remained sat in stunned silence, staring at the humans with expressions of horror and disbelief. "We developed guerrilla warfare," Ambassador Hyunwoo continued, seemingly unaware of the effect their words were having on the audience. "Tactics where civilian populations became active combatants. Every human became a potential enemy soldier. New images showed humans hiding in forests, cities, and mountains, using improvised weapons and tactics against organized military forces. But unlike traditional military conflicts, these battles took place in residential areas, schools, and places of worship. Guerrilla warfare meant that there were no safe zones," Colonel Sora explained. "Hospitals, schools, and religious buildings became legitimate targets because enemy fighters might be hiding there. Children as young as 10 years old carried weapons and participated in combat operations. The display showed human children, barely old enough to walk properly, carrying weapons and wearing military equipment. They moved through destroyed buildings alongside adult fighters, their faces showing the same grim determination as seasoned warriors." Vextar felt bile rise in his throat. "You armed your young to fight in wars?" "Child soldiers were common throughout our history," Dr. Jinho said. "We recruited children as young as 8 years old for military service. They were easier to train, more obedient than adults, and less likely to question orders." The holographic images showed children in various military uniforms from different time periods and regions of Earth. Some carried weapons nearly as large as themselves. Others operated complex machinery under the supervision of adult soldiers. Children were also used as suicide bombers. Ambassador Hyunwoo added quietly, "We convinced them that dying—" Dr. Jinho activated his data device once more, and Vextar felt his heart sink as new holographic displays filled the integration hall, the few remaining Alliance. Representatives who had not fled during the previous revelations now sat rigid in their chairs, afraid to hear what else humans had done to themselves. When conventional warfare proved inconclusive, "We developed the concept of total war," Dr. Jinho began, his scholarly tone unchanged despite the horrific nature of his subject matter. This meant that entire civilizations became military targets. The display showed images of massive industrial complexes, with thousands of humans working to produce weapons, vehicles, and supplies. Smokestacks reached toward the sky, and conveyor belts moved endless streams of military equipment. During total war, every member of society became part of the war effort, Colonel Sora explained. Farmers grew food for soldiers, factory workers built weapons, children collected materials for recycling into military supplies. There were no civilians, only combatants and supporters. Ambassador Hyunwoo gestured toward images showing human settlements being systematically destroyed. Since entire populations supported the war effort, entire populations became legitimate targets. We developed strategies for destroying enemy societies completely. Vexitar watched in growing horror as the images showed organized destruction on a scale he had never imagined. Not just military targets, but farms, schools, hospitals, and residential areas. Everything that made civilization possible was deliberately targeted for elimination. We called it strategic bombing, Dr. Jin-ho continued. The goal was not just to defeat enemy armies, but to break the will of entire populations by destroying their ability to maintain organized society. New images appeared showing flying machines carrying massive explosive devices. But unlike the earlier bombing images, these showed systematic destruction of infrastructure. Bridges collapsed into rivers, power stations exploded in brilliant flashes, and transportation networks disappeared under coordinated attacks. We bombed enemy food production facilities to create famine, Colonel Sora said. We destroyed water treatment plants to spread disease. We targeted power generation to eliminate electricity. The goal was to reduce enemy civilizations to pre-industrial survival levels. Vexitar's forearms trembled as he realized the implications. This was not warfare as he understood it. This was the deliberate destruction of civilization itself, conducted by intelligent beings against other members of their own species. But our most significant innovation was the development of weapons that could destroy entire cities instantly, Ambassador Hyunwoo said quietly. The holographic display changed to show the terrible mushroom clouds that had appeared earlier in the presentation. But now Dr. Jin-ho provided detailed explanations of how these weapons functioned. Nuclear weapons split atoms to release enormous amounts of energy in seconds, he explained. The initial explosion creates temperatures comparable to the core of a star. Everything within several kilometers is vaporized instantly. Images showed the aftermath of nuclear attacks on human cities. Where bustling urban centers had existed, only flat areas of twisted metal and ash remained. The destruction was so complete that it was difficult to believe anything had ever been built there. The radiation released by nuclear weapons continues killing for decades after the initial explosion, Colonel Sora added. Survivors develop cancers, birth defects, and organ failures years later. The land itself becomes poisoned and uninhabitable. Vexitar stared at images showing human children born with horrific deformities, their bodies twisted by radiation exposure. Adults wasted away from diseases caused by invisible contamination that persisted in their environment long after the weapons had been used. Your species built weapons that poisoned your own planet? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. We built over 70,000 of them, Dr. Jin-ho confirmed. Each one was many times more powerful than the weapons we actually used against our cities. Some were designed to destroy areas larger than entire continents. The display showed technical diagrams of increasingly massive nuclear weapons. The numbers associated with their destructive power grew larger and larger, representing explosive force that could obliterate geographical features visible from space. We also developed delivery systems that could transport these weapons to any location on our planet within minutes, Ambassador Hyunwoo explained. Missiles that traveled through space, submarines that could launch attacks from beneath our oceans, aircraft that could penetrate any defense system. New images showed sleek missiles rising from underground silos, leaving trails of fire as they arced through the atmosphere. Submarines surfaced in dark waters, their missile compartments opening to reveal rows of nuclear weapons ready for launch. At the height of our nuclear weapons production, we possessed the ability to destroy every major population center on our planet multiple times over, Colonel Sora said. We calculated that our weapons could kill every human being on Earth 17 times. Vexitar collapsed into his chair, his massive frame shaking uncontrollably. 17 times over. The total nuclear arsenal of the entire Galactic Alliance could not destroy a single planet even once. Yet humans had built enough weapons to eliminate their own species 17 times. We called this doctrine mutually assured destruction. Dr. Jinho continued. The theory was that no rational leader would start a nuclear war, because it would inevitably result in the complete extinction of both sides. The holographic display showed maps of Earth with thousands of target markers, representing cities, military bases, and strategic locations that would be destroyed in a nuclear exchange. Red lines traced the paths of missiles crossing between continents, creating a web of mutual annihilation. For over 40 years, human civilization existed under the constant threat of total extinction. Ambassador Hyunwoo said, every political decision, every international dispute, every economic negotiation took place with the knowledge that a single mistake could end our species forever. Vextar tried to imagine living with such knowledge. How could any being function normally, while knowing that their entire civilization could disappear in minutes? How could parents raise children, or artists create beauty, or scientists pursue knowledge while balanced on the edge of absolute destruction? We adapted our entire society around the threat of nuclear war, Colonel Sora explained. We built underground shelters in major cities. We created early warning systems to detect incoming missiles. We trained children in schools to hide under desks in case of nuclear attack. Images showed human children practicing emergency drills, crouching beneath furniture while adult supervisors timed their responses. The children's faces showed they understood they were preparing for something terrible, even if they could not fully comprehend the scale of destruction they were training to survive. We also developed psychological strategies for living with constant existential threat, Dr. Jinho added. We created entertainment that helped people cope with the possibility of extinction. We developed philosophies and religions that provided meaning in the face of potential annihilation. The display showed humans engaged in various activities despite living under the shadow of nuclear weapons. They built families, created art, explored science, and competed in sports while their governments maintained arsenals capable of ending all human life. But we did not stop building weapons, Ambassador Hyunwoo said, her voice carrying a note of something that might have been regret. Even while living under the threat of mutual destruction, we continued developing more powerful and more accurate nuclear weapons. New images showed increasingly sophisticated missile systems, underground command centers, and early warning networks that spanned the globe. The technology was impressive, but its sole purpose was to make human extinction more efficient and reliable. We also developed tactical nuclear weapons for use in conventional warfare, Colonel Sora explained. Smaller nuclear devices that could be used against military targets without destroying entire cities. The goal was to make nuclear weapons practical for limited conflicts. Vextar's mandibles clicked in disbelief. You created smaller versions of weapons that could destroy cities so you could use them more easily against each other. We tested over 2,000 nuclear weapons during the development process, Dr. Jinho confirmed. We detonated them in our atmosphere underground and beneath our oceans. We contaminated large areas of our own planet just to study the effects of these weapons. The display showed massive explosions in various environments. Desert landscapes were transformed into glass craters. Ocean surfaces erupted in columns of radioactive water. Underground tests created earthquakes that could be detected on the opposite side of the planet. The testing process alone released enough radiation to cause cancer in thousands of people downwind. From the explosion sites, Ambassador Hyunwoo added, we poisoned our own populations in order to perfect our ability to poison our enemies. Vextar stood and walked toward the human delegation, his forearms reaching out as if grasping for something that could make sense of what he was hearing. How did your species survive this? How did you not destroy yourselves completely? Dr. Jinho looked up at the towering alien commander with eyes that held. Vextar excused himself from the integration hall, his 4 legs barely supporting his massive frame as he stumbled through the corridors of Station Nexus Prime. Other beings stepped aside as he passed, noting the strange expression on his face and the way his forearms trembled uncontrollably. He reached his private quarters and sealed the door behind him, then collapsed into his oversized chair. The walls around him displayed his 800 years of military service. Commendations, battle honors, weapons from defeated enemies, and holographic images of victories that had once filled him with pride. Now, staring at these symbols of his military career, Vextar felt something he had never experienced before. Every medal, every honor, every proud moment of his service seemed insignificant compared to what he had just learned about humanity. The siege of Kepler Station His greatest military achievement had lasted 14 years and cost hundreds of thousands of lives. Humans had fought a single civil war that lasted 4 years and killed 3 times as many people. And that had been just one conflict among thousands in their history. Vextar looked at his medal for surviving the Battle of the Twin Suns, where 12 species had fought for control of a strategic star system. The battle had been considered one of the bloodiest conflicts in galactic history, with over 2 million casualties across all species involved. Humans had fought a single war that killed 35 times that number, and they had fought that war against themselves. The alien commander tried to understand how such a thing was possible. In 8 centuries of galactic warfare, he had fought against dozens of different species. Each conflict had clear objectives: territory, resources, survival against extinction, or defense against aggression. Even the most brutal wars had logical reasons behind them. But humans had spent thousands of years fighting wars based on abstract concepts. They had killed millions of their own kind over religious beliefs, political philosophies, economic theories, and cultural differences. They had developed weapons capable of destroying their own planet, then pointed those weapons at themselves for decades. A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry to his quarters. Vextar ignored it, continuing to stare at his wall of honors and trying to process what he had learned. The chime sounded again, followed by a gentle voice. "Commander? This is Ambassador Hyunwoo. May I speak with you?" Vextar considered refusing, but found himself activating the door controls. The small human woman entered his quarters looking tiny in the space designed for beings 3 times her size. "I apologize for disturbing you," she said, settling into a chair across from his desk. "I wanted to make sure you were recovering from our presentation." Vextar stared at her, noting how calm and composed she appeared. This was a member of a species that had nearly destroyed itself multiple times, yet she showed no signs of trauma or distress from discussing their violent history. "I do not understand," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "How does your species still exist? How did you survive yourselves long enough to reach the stars?" Hyunwoo looked around his quarters, noting the displays of military honors and battle memorabilia. "May I ask you something, Commander? In all your years of military service, what drove you to fight?" Vextar considered the question. "Duty, honor, protection of my people and allies, defense against threats to civilization." "Noble motivations," she agreed. "You fought to preserve something valuable. To protect those who could not protect themselves. To maintain order against chaos." The alien commander nodded, feeling slightly more stable as he discussed familiar concepts. "Humans fought for the same reasons," Hyunwoo continued, "but we had no external enemies to unite us. Every threat we faced came from other humans who were fighting for their own version of duty, honor, and protection." She activated a small personal display device, showing images of Earth from space. The blue and green planet looked peaceful and beautiful, with no signs of the warfare that had raged across its surface for millennia. "Imagine if every species in the Galactic Alliance lived on the same planet," she said, "all competing for the same resources, all convinced that their way of life was superior, all willing to fight to defend their beliefs." Vextar felt his understanding begin to shift. In galactic warfare, different species could retreat to their home systems when conflicts became too costly. Humans had been trapped on a single world with nowhere else to go. "We learned to compete for survival in ways that no other species has experienced," Hyunwoo continued. "We developed military strategies, weapons technology, and organizational methods through constant testing against equally intelligent opponents." The display showed images of human military formations from different historical periods: ancient phalanxes, medieval cavalry charges, industrial-era trench warfare, and modern combined arms operations. Each era showed increasing sophistication and deadliness. Every innovation we created was immediately countered by our enemies, forcing us to develop even better solutions, she explained. "We had the most demanding opponents possible, ourselves." Vextar began to understand the implications. Galactic species typically developed military technology to fight enemies with different capabilities and weaknesses. Humans had developed their technology to fight opponents who were exactly as intelligent and resourceful as themselves. "We learned lessons that no other species has had to learn," Hyunwoo said quietly. "We discovered what happens when competition becomes more important than survival. We saw what intelligent beings do to each other, when they have no external threats to unite against. The alien commander looked at his wall of battle honors with new eyes. Every conflict he had fought had an external enemy with different biology, technology, or motivations. He had never faced opponents who understood his tactics as well as he did, who could anticipate his strategies because they thought exactly like him. "Your nuclear weapons," he said slowly. "You built them knowing they could destroy your own world." "We built them because we understood that our enemies would build them too," she replied. "We knew that if we did not develop these weapons first, we would be defenseless against those who did." It was a race to develop the ultimate weapon, knowing that ultimate weapons eliminate the possibility of victory for anyone. Hyunwoo stood and walked to Vextar's window, looking out at the peaceful space station where dozens of species coexisted without conflict. "Commander, do you know why humans really joined the Galactic Alliance?" Vextar had assumed they sought protection, like most species that achieved spaceflight and discovered the dangers of the galaxy, but everything he had learned about humanity suggested they were not seeking safety. "We joined because we recognized the patterns," she said, turning back to face him. "The galaxy is heading toward the same kind of total competition that nearly destroyed us. Species are developing increasingly powerful weapons, competing for resources and territory, building alliances based on fear rather than cooperation." The alien commander felt a chill run through his massive frame. "You believe galactic civilization is approaching self-destruction?" "We see the signs," she confirmed. "The same escalating tensions, the same arms races, the same willingness to sacrifice everything for competitive advantage. The only difference is that galactic species still have external enemies to focus on." Hyunwoo activated her display again, showing images of various galactic conflicts, the Void Wars, the Machine Uprising, the Crystalline Rebellion, all the conflicts that had defined Vextar's military career. "What happens when you defeat all the external threats, Commander? When the Void Wraiths are contained, the Machine Collective is destroyed, and the hive swarms are eliminated? What will all these military species do with their weapons and their competitive instincts?" Vextar stared at the images, seeing them from a completely new perspective. He had spent 8 centuries fighting to protect galactic civilization from external threats, never considering what would happen if they actually succeeded. "They will turn on each other," he whispered. "Yes," she said simply, "just like we did. And when that happens, they will have weapons and organizational capabilities that we never possessed during our worst conflicts. The scale of destruction will be beyond anything our species ever imagined." The alien commander stood and walked to his wall of military honors, touching each medal and commendation with trembling claws. "How do we prevent it?" "The same way we prevented our own extinction," Hyunwoo replied. "By learning to recognize when competition becomes more dangerous than the threats it was meant to address. By understanding that the greatest enemy any civilization faces is its own unlimited capacity for escalation." She joined him at the wall, looking up at the symbols of his military service. "Commander, you have spent 800 years protecting the galaxy from external threats. That was necessary and honorable work. But the next phase of galactic development will require different skills." Vextar looked down at the small human woman, beginning to understand why her species had truly joined the Alliance. "You came to teach us how to step back from the brink." "We came because we are the only species in the galaxy that has graduated from the School of Total War," she said. "We learned every lesson that warfare can teach, including the most important one: when to stop fighting." The alien commander. 3 months after the human integration ceremony, Commander Vextar stood once again before the memorial wall in Station Nexus Prime. The names of fallen warriors still covered the black stone surface, but now he read them with different eyes. Each name represented someone who had died fighting external enemies, never knowing that the greatest threat to galactic civilization would come from within. His mourning ritual had changed. Instead of simply honoring the dead, he now studied the patterns of galactic warfare with new understanding. The Void Wars had ended when the Alliance developed weapons powerful enough to contain the Wraiths. The Machine Collective had been defeated when multiple species combined their technology. The hive swarms had retreated when faced with overwhelming military coordination. Every major galactic conflict had ended with the Alliance becoming stronger and more unified. But Vextar now understood what humans had recognized immediately. Success against external enemies was creating the conditions for internal warfare on a scale never before seen. "Commander?" His aide approached with the daily reports, but her voice carried a note of concern. "Sir, are you feeling well? You have been different since the human integration." Vextar accepted the data pad and scrolled through the usual information. Border skirmishes, supply issues, personnel assignments. But now he read between the lines, looking for signs of the escalating tensions that humans had warned about. 3 territorial disputes between Alliance member species in the past month. Arms production increasing across multiple sectors. Trade agreements being renegotiated based on military considerations rather than economic benefits. The patterns were subtle but unmistakable to someone who now knew what to look for. "Schedule a meeting with the human delegation," he told his aide, "and request permission to address the Alliance Council next week." The young Altarian looked confused. "Sir, what should I list as the meeting topic?" Vexitar considered how to explain what he had learned without sounding like he had lost his mind. Military preparedness for post-conflict scenarios. Later that day, he met with Ambassador Hyunwoo, Colonel Sora, and Dr. Jin Ho in a private conference room. The humans looked exactly as calm and composed as they had during their first presentation, but Vextar now understood that their serenity came from hard-won knowledge rather than natural peacefulness. "Commander, how can we help you?" Ambassador Hyunwoo asked, settling into her chair with the easy confidence of someone who had faced far worse challenges than a confused alien military officer. "I have been studying galactic military trends. Since our last conversation," Vexitar began, activating a holographic display showing statistical data from across Alliance space. "I believe I'm beginning to see the patterns you warned about." Dr. Jin Ho leaned forward with interest. "What patterns specifically?" "Arms production is increasing faster than external threats require," Vextar explained, highlighting relevant sections of his data. "Multiple species are developing weapon systems that exceed any reasonable defensive needs. Trade agreements are becoming militarized. Alliance members are forming sub-alliances based on military capabilities rather than shared interests." Colonel Sora nodded approvingly. "You are learning to read the signs. What else do you notice?" "The rhetoric is changing," Vextar continued, feeling more confident as he shared his analysis. "Military leaders across the Alliance are talking about preparedness, strategic advantage, and defensive necessity, but the underlying message is about competition between Alliance members." He brought up recordings of recent Alliance Council meetings, highlighting specific language patterns that he had learned to recognize. Species are not just preparing to defend against external threats. They are preparing to compete with each other. Ambassador Hyunwoo exchanged glances with her colleagues. "Commander, you have identified the early stages of what we call the security spiral. Each species increases its military capabilities to feel safer, which makes other species feel less safe, causing them to increase their own capabilities. It is a feedback loop that accelerates until someone decides that preemptive action is safer than continued preparation," Dr. Jin Ho added. "We went through this cycle dozens of times throughout our history." Vextar felt his heart racing as he understood the implications. "How do we stop it?" "The same way we stopped it," Colonel Sora replied. "By helping each species understand that their real security comes from cooperation, not competition. By demonstrating that military strength without diplomatic wisdom leads to self-destruction." The alien commander activated another section of his data display, showing his analysis of current Alliance military structure. "I want to propose changes to how we organize galactic defense. Instead of species maintaining separate military forces, we could integrate our capabilities more completely." Dr. Jin Ho studied the proposal with obvious interest. "Joint training programs, shared command structures, integrated logistics. Yes, this could work. But you will face resistance from military leaders who see independent capability as essential for security. That is why I need your help," Vextar said, looking at each of the humans in turn. "I have military credibility, but I lack your understanding of how to manage the transition from competition to cooperation." Ambassador Hyunwoo smiled, the expression transforming her face from diplomatic neutrality to genuine warmth. "Commander, we would be honored to work with you on this project. But you should understand that it will be the most difficult campaign of your military career. More difficult than the siege of Kepler Station? Vextar asked. Much more difficult, she replied. You will be fighting against the instincts of every intelligent species in the galaxy. You will be asking military leaders to give up the independence and competitive advantage that they believe keeps their people safe. Colonel Sora activated her own data device showing examples from human history. We had to create new institutions, new ways of thinking about security, and new methods for resolving disputes without warfare. It took us centuries to develop these systems, and we had the motivation of knowing that failure meant extinction. Galactic species do not yet understand that they face the same choice, Dr. Jinho added. They still believe that military strength alone can provide security. They have not learned that unlimited competition eventually destroys everything it was meant to protect. Vextar stood and walked to the window, looking out at the peaceful corridors of Station Nexus Prime. Beings from dozens of species moved about their daily business, unaware that their civilization was approaching the same crisis point that had nearly destroyed humanity. What will happen if we fail? He asked. The same thing that almost happened to us, Ambassador Hyunwoo replied quietly. Galactic warfare will escalate until multiple species develop weapons capable of destroying planets. The competition for ultimate security will create ultimate insecurity for everyone. The alien commander turned back to face the human delegation, his forearms steady for the first time in months. Then we will not fail. I will present our proposal to the Alliance Council, and I will use every bit of influence I have gained over 8 centuries of military service. You understand that this will change how other beings see you? Colonel Sora asked. Many will view your proposals as weakness, even betrayal of military principles. Vextar thought about his wall of military honors, his reputation as the galaxy's premier warrior, and the respect he had earned through 800 years of successful warfare. All of it would be at risk if he advocated for reducing military competition between Alliance members. Then they will learn the same lesson I learned, he said finally. That true military wisdom includes knowing when not to fight. Dr. Jin Ho stood and extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement. Commander, we will provide whatever support and knowledge you need. Our species learned these lessons through thousands of years of warfare and millions of casualties. If we can help the galaxy learn them through cooperation instead of catastrophe, our entire history will have been worthwhile. As Vextar shook the small human's hand, he felt the weight of his new understanding settle into purpose. He was no longer just a military commander protecting the galaxy from external threats. He had become something far more important. A teacher, helping galactic civilization learn to survive its own success. The veteran warrior of countless battles had found his greatest mission, and for the first time in 8 centuries, it was not about winning a war. It was about preventing one that no one could win. 3 days later, Commander Vextar stood before the Alliance Council, his forearms steady as he prepared to deliver the most important presentation of his military career. Behind him sat the human delegation, ready to share their hard-won knowledge with a galaxy that did not yet understand how desperately it needed their lessons. The memorial wall would continue to honor those who had died fighting external enemies. But if Vextar succeeded in his new mission, future generations would never need to add names of those who died fighting each other. The greatest military victory in galactic history would be the war that was never fought.